The generation that was told to go outside and not come back until the streetlights came on is now being criticized for being too involved in their children's lives. And that contradiction tells you almost everything you need to know about Generation X parents. If you grew up in the late 1960s, the 1970s, or the early 1980s, chances are you remember coming home to an empty house. Both of your parents were working, something that was becoming increasingly common at scale for the first time in American history. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, between 1970 and 1990, the percentage of mothers in the workforce with children under 6 jumped from roughly 37% to nearly 60%. You were a latchkey kid. You let yourself in. You made a snack. You figured it out. A 2004 study by Reach Advisors described Gen X as one of the least parented and least nurtured generations in modern U.S. history. That isn't an insult. It's a description. You learned to solve your own problems because there wasn't much alternative. If you had a conflict at school, your parents weren't emailing teachers. If your grades slipped, they weren't negotiating with administrators. If you were struggling socially, the advice was usually some version of work it out. Independence wasn't a philosophy. It was logistics. That daily autonomy shaped how you saw the world. You developed competence early. You handled boredom. You handled discomfort. You handled yourself. But independence came paired with something quieter. Emotional self-sufficiency can look like strength. Sometimes it feels like isolation. Fast forward to today, and listen to how Gen X parents talk about their childhoods. Many of them openly acknowledge that growing up alone shaped them in ways they are still unpacking. And many consciously decided to parent differently, more present, more attentive, more emotionally available. Not because they hated their upbringing, but because they remember what was missing. Some observers have even nicknamed Gen X parents stealth fighter parents. They aren't hovering constantly. They aren't micromanaging every social interaction. But when something truly matters, they show up with intensity. They'll let their child handle everyday drama independently. But if there's bullying, injustice, or a serious issue, they'll walk into the principal's office prepared and focused. It can surprise people who assumed they were detached. What's interesting is that this shift often wasn't intentional at first. Many Gen X parents say they valued the freedom they had growing up and swore they wouldn't overcorrect. Yet when they became parents, something shifted. The memory of walking into an empty house. The memory of handling emotional confusion alone. The question of whether anyone was really paying attention. Those memories resurface in subtle ways. So what happens when you parent through the lens of your own upbringing? Developmental psychologist Diana Baumrind identified parenting styles based on two primary dimensions: responsiveness, meaning warmth and emotional availability, and demandingness, meaning expectations and boundaries. The style that consistently shows the healthiest outcomes is called authoritative parenting. It combines high warmth with clear expectations. It isn't authoritarian, which emphasizes control without emotional support. And it isn't permissive, which emphasizes warmth without boundaries. Authoritative parenting says, I care deeply about you, I'm here, and you are still responsible for your choices. Decades of research show that children raised in this style tend to regulate emotions better, display higher self-esteem, solve problems more effectively, and experience lower rates of anxiety and depression. They also perform better academically and socially. There is no sweeping study declaring that Gen X parents overwhelmingly adopt the authoritative style. But listen to how they describe their goals. Be present, but don't suffocate. Set boundaries, but stay warm. Let them struggle, but don't let them feel alone. That language maps closely to the authoritative framework. If this moved you, comment 9 right now. If it didn't, comment 0. Your voice matters. Take 1 second and share it. Gen X understands struggle in a specific way. Many graduated into recessions. They saw retirement plans shrink. They watched corporate loyalty dissolve. They grew up believing stability was guaranteed, and then learned it wasn't. That experience shapes how they prepare their kids. They can't promise that life will be stable, so they try to build resilience. At the same time, they are raising children in an environment radically different from the one they knew. Gen X is the first generation parenting entirely in the era of social media. Every achievement can be posted. Every mistake can be amplified. For people who grew up when privacy was default and embarrassment faded naturally, this landscape feels foreign. That tension contributes to what many describe as emotional exhaustion. Gen X parents often belong to the sandwich generation. They are supporting aging parents while raising children and navigating mid-career plateaus. Financial pressures linger. Cultural expectations shift constantly. Their own parents may believe they are too soft. Their children may believe they are too strict. They are translating between worlds that no longer share a common language. They want to preserve what was valuable in their upbringing: independence, self-reliance, resilience. But they also want to provide what they wished they had: emotional presence, validation, someone actively paying attention. Interestingly, Gen X parents often care less about external validation of their parenting style. Growing up with minimal oversight taught them something subtle: outside approval is unreliable. They tend to calibrate parenting decisions against their own memories rather than public opinion. That means they may allow a teenager to repeat a mistake, trusting that repetition fosters learning. But they will also answer the phone at 2 in the morning without judgment. They remember what it felt like not to have anyone to call. Technology plays another role. Gen X is old enough to remember life before smartphones, but young enough to use them fluently. They experienced boredom as a normal condition. They created their own entertainment. They know what uninterrupted presence feels like. So when they set limits around screens, it usually comes from lived experience rather than fear. They understand the benefits of technology. They also understand the cost of constant distraction. They aren't anti-tech. They are wary of excess. If you see a Gen X parent at a school event looking slightly uncomfortable amid hyper-involved parents but still fully engaged, that's the balance they're trying to strike. Raise kids who feel secure and supported, but also capable and self-directed. It isn't tidy. It doesn't align perfectly with trending parenting advice. But for a generation once described as among the least nurtured in American history, the effort to show up emotionally matters. Not just physically present in the bleachers, but mentally present. Watching, listening. They are attempting to interrupt certain cycles while preserving others. Keep the independence. Add the warmth. Maintain resilience. Offer reassurance. And maybe the complexity itself is the defining feature. Generation X has never been particularly invested in fitting into neat generational categories. As parents, they aren't chasing perfection. They're blending memory with intention. They know what it feels like to figure things out alone, and they're determined that their children won't have to do it the same way. So when people look at Generation X parents and call them contradictory, maybe what they're really seeing is evolution. A generation that learned independence by necessity is now trying to pair it with intentional presence. They remember what it felt like to unlock a quiet house after school, to solve problems without guidance, to sit with emotions no one named. And instead of repeating that pattern blindly, they're adjusting it. They're not trying to erase resilience. They're trying to humanize it. They want their kids to know how to handle disappointment, to navigate friendships, to solve problems without collapsing. But they also want them to feel seen while doing it. That combination, strength with emotional safety, isn't accidental. It's a conscious recalibration. And that recalibration isn't easy. They're balancing aging parents, career shifts, rising costs of living, and a digital culture that never turns off. They're parenting in public, under social comparison, while still carrying private memories of what it felt like to grow up largely on their own. If they seem intense sometimes, it's because they understand what neglect can quietly cost. If they seem hands-off at other times, it's because they trust struggle to build competence. They are not confused. They are integrating. Generation X. Parenting might not fit neatly into labels, but maybe that's the point. It's an attempt to keep what built strength while adding what built connection. To raise children who feel both capable and cared for. Who know how to stand on their own, but also know someone is paying attention. If this perspective gave you a new way to understand Gen X parents, or even helped you understand your own upbringing, take a moment to like this video so it can reach others navigating the same questions. Share it with someone raising kids between two worlds. And if you enjoy thoughtful deep dives into psychology, generational patterns, and the forces shaping modern families, subscribe and join the next conversation.